We live in a world of volatility. These things are creating some shocks that will impact us, but they're not going to throw us off our fundamental growth path or underline the very strong fundamentals of the Canadian economy.
With election looming, and it's not too far away, obviously the Harper Conservatives want to go into that election in October or sooner with a balanced budget. But the challenge, of course, dropping oil prices. Could that put a crimp in their style? For more on this, I'm joined by the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Aaron Woodrick. So today we had a report from the Parliamentary Budget Officer talking about the drop in oil revenues to the government coffers. But you see a bit of a silver lining in this, Aaron. Why don't you spell it out for us?
Sure, Adrian. Well, when we saw this report this morning, we were actually very encouraged. The Parliamentary Budget Office has crunched the numbers. They've taken a couple of different scenarios based on low prices of oil. There have been a lot of concerns, obviously, with the dramatic drop in the price of oil, that government revenues would be so low that the government would be unable to balance the budget. But the good news that came out of this report was that even in their worst case scenario, they found that the government, under the current status quo, would end up running a deficit of only $400 million. And that's out of a $279 billion budget, which is only 0.1%. So from where we stand, we think that's encouraging, and we think that it demonstrates the government's still well placed to balance the budget.
Yeah, and I think that 0.014% that you refer to in your press release could easily be found. You note a couple of areas, corporate welfare for one, but there's under a $279 billion budget, Aaron, you sure as heck think, hey, a little bit of trimming here and there is entirely possible without any services being infected, without the public even realizing that something in various government departments and agencies has been trimmed. So let me just put this to you in another way. Do you have confidence that the federal government is going to stay on this path, or will they say, hey, look, we had this challenge with the oil, we've got this tiny little deficit, but ostensibly we're in balance? Like, what will they do? Will they play with the numbers?
I certainly hope they don't play with the numbers. We certainly hope that they balance it. We have every confidence that they're going to. They've been repeatedly said that they are going to, even since the drop in oil prices. They remain confident. We're certainly encouraging them to stay the course. They did make an election commitment to do so. They didn't make a caveat saying, we'll only balance it if oil revenues are at a certain amount or the oil price is at a certain level. So we're certainly encouraging them to stick with their promise and balance the budget.
Yeah, okay. Let me dive into a little bit about what the report actually says. Aaron, they say that the revenue to federal coffers is $8.2 billion, what it normally would have been based on the current price of oil. Where do we find that money?
I'm sorry, where do we find the money?
Where do you find that money in the budget, in your view?
In terms of where it's allocated, or
no.
where do we make up the difference?
I guess, where do you make up the difference?
Oh, well, it completely depends. I mean, the one thing that a lot of people don't factor in is that when there's a drop in the revenues from the sale of oil, other industries benefit. When oil is cheaper, people can use more of it. Other businesses that have to use energy can benefit from it. So other economic activity could go up, and revenues can sort of cancel out some of the loss as a result of the low oil price per se.
Is there any other area? Again, I mentioned in your press release that you talked to two specific areas, like corporate welfare, for example. Right. That, of course, is always very unpopular because, as you and I know, cabinet ministers like to go around the country, spread money around in various constituencies because that's beneficial to the government of the day, or whatever the case may be. The CTF for years has been railing against successive Liberal and Conservative governments about corporate welfare, these various economic development agencies. I don't see them really doing anything like that, though it would be such a quick and easy fix because of the competitors paying for their competition, whatever the case may be. But when the Conservatives are talking to Canadians and they say we need to balance the books, we need a tiny little bit of austerity measure. Yet on the other hand, Aaron, then they hear from the Liberals saying, big spend, big programs, big government, this is what Canadians want. It's mixed messages, to be sure, but who wins the day, in your view?
I think the government looks pretty good today. I mean, they said that they had factored in for this. It looks like they're going to be very close to it. As you say, there are many easy ways that the government could balance the budget without impacting services. Corporate welfare is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's one of the things that I think most people who are fiscally conservative-minded in this country continue to be troubled with by this government. So it's something that they could address. And when it comes to the opposition parties, they demand more spending, they demand bigger programming. That's disconcerting. They seem to want to have it both ways. They want to critique the government for not balancing the budget, and yet they're demanding increased spending at the same time. So we're not quite sure how the opposition parties square that circle.
All right, in the last 30 seconds we have left, Aaron, of course, the federal government has delayed the budget to April. Does that concern you at all?
Not terribly. I mean, it was eyebrow raising. If they delayed it much longer than that, it might be more disconcerting. I think it is reasonable, given that the price dropped so dramatically. Perhaps they have to recalculate and adjust accordingly. So we would like to see the budget sooner rather than later. But if it's a matter of a few weeks, we don't think it makes that much of a difference.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.